so a woman might think that she has low libido, when really she just doesn't want to have sex with her partner because there's years of unresolved issues and unspoken conversations that have built up this wall between them. So it's not that she physically, has a low libido diagnosis. It's that, no, she actually doesn't want to have sex with him until these issues can get cleared. If women have this disconnect with their vaginas through trauma or like a lack of physicality or bad sexual experiences, then they're feeling a dissociation. So what you just said about that bed shaking, life-changing, ecstasy-inducing, hours-long orgasm type sex, that's what I'm trying to show people is possible for everyone. And so if they've had these experiences of really short-lived or disappointing intimacy, that can be totally different and totally changed.
That was Kim Anami, a holistic sex and relationship coach who is here to infuse more passion into your life in bed. Her work is a spiritual blend of over 2 decades of tantra, Taoism, transpersonal psychology, philosophy, and growth accelerating practices. If you're looking to deepen your connection, your intimacy, energy, your pleasure, and creativity, then this is the episode for you. This episode contains such life-changing information that you do not want to miss, so buckle up and be sure to get your partner to listen in on this one too, because the information in this episode will greatly benefit you both. And if after listening to this episode you want more, I am really excited to announce that right as this episode launches, Kim's signature course, Vaginal Kung Fu, is returning this February. Open registration is from January 19th to February 5th. It's an 8-week virtual salon to strengthen and tone the vagina and enhance and increase your orgasms. If you're thinking, why would I need to strengthen my vagina? Well, you'll learn all about why in this episode, but also, if a woman is disconnected from her sexuality and her vagina, she is operating at a massive disadvantage. You can't tune into your sexual energy and sexual pleasure if you have a numb, under-functioning vagina. Kim believes that every woman should be able to shoot ping pong balls from her vagina. I know, you might be confused right now, but keep listening and you'll know what I mean. I personally have experienced massive benefits from Kim's advice, so I'm also going to be taking this course. I hope you'll join me. Link to check out the course is in the show notes and description box below. And if you're tuning into this episode after open registration, don't worry. Kim has more courses coming up throughout the year, including the Well-Fucked Woman, the Coming Together Couples Salon, the Sexy Mama Salon, and Sexual Mastery for Men. All right, are you ready? Let's get into this episode. All right. Thank you so much, Kim, for being here. I am so excited for this conversation. And actually, since years ago when I learned about you, I have always thought what I would give to sit on a couch with Kim Anami and just have a conversation with you. So I'm really pumped about this conversation.
I'm really excited as well. I love your work and your commitment and how creative you are. And we have a virtual couch instead.
We do. Also, I want to say too, to preface that I'm like a little bit nervous to get into this conversation because I've never talked so openly about this topic, but I'm also really excited because it's such important information. Okay, so before I dive in with like all those questions I want to ask you, I think it would be good to preface and just kind of set the groundwork for people who are learning about you through this conversation. And they might be like, what the heck is this woman about? Like shooting ping pongs out of your vagina, carrying surfboards, weightlifting with your vagina, all this type of thing. So my first question is, you talk a lot about how it's a worldwide problem that so many women are underfucked. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Right. So the whole basis of my work is the idea that sexual energy is life force energy. This is the energy that creates new life. And if we're not creating babies with that energy, then it's up to us to really learn how to tune into it and channel it as the creative, rejuvenating, and healing power that it really is. And so the problem is what we're typically taught, all over the world about sex. Maybe not the case in some indigenous cultures. They might have a more primal, intuitive connection to their sexuality. But in most of the civilized world is that there's so much taboo and shame and trauma that's overlaid on top of our sexual expression, is that most people have a very distorted and traumatic relationship to their sexuality, if not literal trauma that they've experienced in their lifetimes. And so the idea that it's this healing, potent, revitalizing force that we can use as a creative energy in our lives is really foreign to most people. Although when I start talking about it, they often get this intuitive resonance, like, yeah, that's what I've always felt, but there's been no framework to articulate that. The dominant messaging of the culture is very much the opposite. And so my work then is all about the notion that if you tune into this sexual energy and this power, that it will then transform your entire life. This is the creative and birthing power of the universe, right? We are the channels for that, especially as women. And so when a woman really begins to inhabit and own and wear that powerful, ecstatic life force energy, she becomes a force of nature. She becomes unstoppable. She becomes what I call a well-fucked woman, which is someone who really owns and radiates this beauty and sensuality that is born out of her sexual energy, right? This is the natural state that we all ought to live in. It's our natural free energy source, the biggest free energy source we have in the universe. And we have it literally at our fingertips. And yet for so many people, I can feel like it's miles and miles and miles and bodies away from them.
Yeah. When I learned about you, I was so compelled to just keep digging, because you went into exactly that it transforms every area of your life, and it's not just sex. It really transforms a lot of just how you go about living your life, and success and happiness and joy. And I kind of wanted to share a little bit with you about my personal story. Basically, the way I learned about you is that I had just given birth to my second child. And so I was in that postpartum breastfeeding phase, lower libido, just in that like taking care of multiple kids, way different than before we had children. And a friend of mine came over. And we had been friends for a while, but something about her just seemed different when she came over to my house that night. And I didn't notice the last few times that I had seen her. My husband was at work. She came over to like make dinner with me. And I'm like, wow, Sarah, you are just looking extra sexy and vibrant and just beautiful lately. Like, what is going on? Your lips are extra plumped. Your hair looks vivacious. Like, you just look so sexy lately. Like, what is going on? And she leaned in and she's like, I'm having incredible sex. I'm like, what? Like, I was just so taken aback by that. I had never considered that notion, like you're saying, that it extends to other areas of your life. And she told me that she had taken a course from this woman named Kim Anami, and I didn't know who you were. And she just started telling me all about it as we're chopping tomatoes and making salad. And I'm just like, tell me more. Like, it just completely shook me. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because I started to learn about your work and what you share about, and it completely transformed our sex life, even amongst that like incredibly often difficult time to navigate within your sex life. It completely changed everything for us. And yeah, that's how I learned about you. So I completely resonate with everything you're saying about how it changes everything in your life, and the dogma and kind of what we're taught in our life about sex growing up. Sex kind of is like told that it's for men, right? Like that it's like, oh, women, well, you'll enjoy it, but like it's mainly for men. That's kind of like the way that I was taught, at least a little bit. And that you'll enjoy it, and so I think that's what's so pivotal about the work that you do, just expressing how that energy within inside of you.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you actually met a well-fucked woman and saw that whole concept in real time, right? That she was different and changed, and something was different about her, a different kind of radiance, or je ne sais quoi, which is, sourced from orgasms. So, yeah, I mean, like in terms of the male-female stuff, I do think that men are given more permission to be overtly sexual. And there is that messaging that women almost need to be coerced, right, to have sex, right? And one of the biggest archetypes that exists is Madonna whore, right? Women are either sluts or they're virgins. And there doesn't really exist this happy medium where women can be healthy, voracious, empowered sexual beings. And that's the middle ground that I teach. That's really the core of my work, right? Is that, yes, you can be a woman who loves sex and is very sensual, wants sex, but it doesn't mean that you have to take on this other programming of, the whore. archetype, or there's that really good girl archetype, like, the woman has to be talked into it or coerced or manipulated into having sex, right? Or like you said, almost like a duty or obligation to please the man. Like that's another kind of ideology. And so this is where in my work, I really encourage people to examine, just like you said, these ideologies and beliefs that they've taken on, right? That may not actually be their truth, but they've been superimposed upon them by the culture at large, by their family of origin, by their religious upbringing, by the media, right? Like it's the same thing in the media. You see sex everywhere. It's selling everything from toilets to toothbrushes, but you're not really allowed to have it and enjoy it, right? It's this, again, this dichotomy. And so it's no wonder that people have this chasm of disconnect and dissociation within themselves when there's so much conflicting messaging going on. And then you add on top of that, if they've had any kind of trauma like sexual abuse growing up or assault or violation, then unless they've actually cleared that, and that's again part of what I do with people, is clear those blockages and rewire those neural pathways away from trauma and into pleasure, then they aren't going to fully reclaim that state. And part of what I tell everyone is that everyone can. This is the Anami guarantee, is that every woman can be having a high libido, a salacious sex drive, multiple vaginal G-spot, cervical ejaculating orgasms. Every woman indeed can shoot ping pong balls from her vagina. Every man can learn how to have sex for 8 hours at a time and separate orgasm from ejaculation. All of these things are possible for every single person. And it's just a matter of digging in and doing that work to remove these blockages, clear the space, and come back to our natural state, which is as sensual, beautiful, radiant beings. We all have that capacity. Every single person, I guarantee it.
That's like such encouraging information. And I think I have a lot of mothers, especially listening, who might be like, yeah, like resonating with what you're saying. And they're like, but how do I get there? Because I'm so busy and I have this long list of to-dos and I have all the kids. And how are we going to make our sex life, spontaneous when we have like however many kids? And what advice do you have, I guess, to start that work of healing and to get to a place where you are at a constant simmer, as you talk about, which I'm sure we'll get into, so that you're wanting sex with your partner all day long, or maybe just consistently?
Well, I think a big part of it is like in the work that I do in my online courses, I call them salons, is looking at these blockages, like these ideas and beliefs that we've taken on to see, okay, is that really my truth, or have I taken that on? Like, for example, the thing that you said, right? Do men want or need sex more than women? Is that really true? If I looked in my heart of hearts, do I really believe that? Or is that just an idea that I've taken on that's been permeated throughout the culture? If people have any kinds of sexual trauma that's never been addressed therapeutically and they've never healed that, all of these things show up in the body, right? So a woman might think that she has low libido when really she just doesn't want to have sex with her partner because there's years of unresolved issues and unspoken conversations that have built up this wall between them. So it's not that she physically, has a low libido diagnosis. It's that, no, she actually doesn't want to have sex with him until these issues can get cleared, right? The same thing could apply to a lack of lubrication or painful intercourse. These are the vagina's messages saying, hey, stop. I need you to deal with this stuff before I want to go any further. So it's, in the allopathic regime, we're really encouraged to dominate the body, right? Silence the body, don't listen to its messages, override them. And in my work, it's like, no, the body is all wise and all we need to do is listen to it. But that involves a deeper psycho-spiritual conversation with the inner self, with our, with our past, with our higher self to figure out, well, why is the body saying this and how can I get through this? So one of the big tenets in my work is radical honesty, right? So having really honest conversations with yourself, with your partner to clear away any of that residue that's built up over the years, right? People shove things under the proverbial carpet and after a while you have these massive piles in your room that you have to jump over all these things that you've stuffed under the carpet. carpet, right? And so my work is like, let's lift up the carpet and one by one, let's pull out all of those things. And as we do, we will notice the shift in the energy between us because we've built walls now. And this is a process of taking down those walls, creating that intimacy and trust again, where we've probably moved away from it, and then opening up. And so the true power of sexuality as this transformative, rebirthing, ecstatic experience comes through having the ability to really open and trust and surrender both to ourselves and with our partners. And if we don't have that, we could be having what I call junk food sex, which is just bust out an orgasm, have a stress relief, put you to sleep kind of orgasm, whether you're on your own or with a partner, versus really opening and truly, truly surrendering to this cataclysmic, unknown. And that's where we hit the gold of what I call gourmet sex, which is the kind of sex that really changes your life. And the big barometric question I ask people is, does your sex life make you feel rejuvenated, energized, transformed, and like it changed your life? And if it doesn't, that means you're doing it wrong. And that's not a judgment as much to say that there's a way of having sex that gives you energy and feeds you and becomes a power source, or it actually depletes you, which is epitomized by the guy who busts out an orgasm and then passes out, right? Like that's how depleted the guy is. So, the proof is in the pudding.
Yes, everything you're saying is so on point, and especially from my own personal experience, it was such a mind shift for me, just realizing like how important and integral this is, and just reading the stuff. Honestly, anyone listening, just subscribe to your email list and get your weekly emails, and it pumps you up. I feel like so much of it is in the mind, and when you learn the true power of opening up that way, and the tools on how to help you and your partner truly trust each other, like you said, the more you trust each other and open up, then you can actually open up during sex and have amazing sex. And for me, back when I learned about you, it was just, oh, we have 20 minutes, the baby's asleep, we got to hurry up type of thing, just get it done. And it just felt like a chore, And then once you learned like, oh, this is actually the most beautiful and fulfilling and enriching thing, and it's so helpful for our relationship, and we flourish and thrive, like through that was integral. But like you said, it's all encompassing on having to be open with your partner and get rid of all that gunk so that you truly trust your partner. And that's some really powerful information you share as well. So can you talk a little bit about the connection between what men really need and what women really need, like from each other, connecting that emotional piece?
I think that, one of the things that there was a quote somewhere, I'm trying to remember, like the sexiest thing that a man can do is exactly what he says he's going to do. So I'd say that it's this idea of integrity and follow through, keeping your word as a man. And by doing that, you're really embodying that archetype of like strong pillar power, right, that a woman can fall into. Because one of the catchphrases that I use is, if I fall, will you catch me? And that's the question that women are perpetually asking men. If I fall, will you catch me? If I surrender, if I open myself emotionally, sexually, and totally let go in this cataclysm of ecstasy, will you hold that space for me, or will you drop me like a hot potato kind of thing? So that idea that women are testing men, yeah, fuck right we are. We're always wanting to see, like, are you going to hold that space, or are you going to drop me? So that's, I think, a really important thing for men to continually reinforce for women, and that's keeping your word. If you say you're going to even take out the garbage, if you say you're going to have a sex date, if you say you're going to bring her to an orgasm, like, follow through on everything. And then for women, I'd say that the sexiest thing that she can give to her partner is surrender. This complete trust and abandonment and openness that she's just like, take me, I'm yours. That is the biggest surrender or turn on for a man. And this reinforcement that he is worthy of that surrender. So obviously there's a give and take in that circular relationship of like, he has to be worthy of that for her to feel like she'll surrender. But that's the continual work for the two people to do with each other, is that the woman is really practicing opening and surrendering, and the man is really reinforcing that he's worthy of that surrender, he's worthy of that trust.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautifully said. I also think in addition to that, things that you talk about how women take longer to warm up and just learning like practical tools on not expecting women to just be ready, let's go, it's all over in 10 minutes kind of thing. And learning that type of information on the importance of generosity to your partner, which will in turn bring generosity back together because then the woman is more warmed up and the woman will be super excited and wanting to like please the partner as well. That was really pivotal for us as well, in addition to everything you just said.
There's an old Taoist expression. It says that men are like fire. They are quick to ignite and quick to extinguish. And women are like water. They're slow to boil, but they keep on boiling. And so the work for men is to really cultivate their stamina so that they have full control over their orgasm. They can go for at least an hour without pausing or having an orgasm. And, because a lot of women take that long to reach orgasm and at least the deeper vaginal orgasms. And then for women, it's about cultivating that simmer. So instead of going from ice to boiling, they're already hovering and living in this simmer zone of being in touch with their sexuality and their sensual energy and flowing in that space. They're already living in this place of perpetual relationship and sensuality with the world and themselves and their partner. And so it's an easy move to slide into sexuality. So obviously these things are cultivated over time where the man practices and does work to make sure that he is in that realm of uber stamina. And the woman is also doing things so that she's in that place of living open and sensual and free rather than shut down and closed. And so when a couple is coming into it from that space, if the woman is shut down and the man is having really quick orgasms, they're never going to be sexually fulfilled, right? He might think that he is, but he's really not. And he's going to have this massive guilt because he knows he didn't go the distance or even remotely go the distance with his partner. And she's going to feel resentful and let down and probably will avoid having sex with him, right? If she's got a two-pump chump, like a perpetual premature ejaculator who's not doing anything to work on that, then she's going to avoid sex. And she won't know why. She'll probably think she has a low libido or she's tired from the kids, but really it's because he comes in 3 minutes every time. And she's like, look, I'm not your receptacle. I've got other things to do that are more fulfilling, like laundry, then do that again, right? And so this is that unspoken dialogue that they're probably not even conscious of, right? Like unless you bring these things out into a conversation, she just probably, like I said, thinks she has a low libido. And he's thinking, she never wants to have sex with me anymore. It's not like it used to be in the relationship. It's like, no, she probably just got tired of you never improving that, right? And she's like, look, whatever. I don't have, even the 3 minutes it would take for us to have sex, I'd rather go bake some cookies.
Totally. And I totally see how it could be subconscious because you're like, I might just not like sex that much, and not even realizing what the potential could be because you think that's what sex is when really it could be this like bed shaking, world shattering, like gourmet long sex, but just because he isn't able to get there, not putting it all on him. Obviously, like you said, it's both inner work on both people. But how can men, because you said, I remember I've seen you say it in a video before that it's like such a problem that so many men have that early ejaculation problem. So what tools can they do to help extend that?
Breathing. Number one is breathing. And I think the stats are 75% of men ejaculate within 3 minutes of intercourse. It's really,
that's insane.
It is. It's dismal.
That's so hard to believe.
It is and it isn't. Like if you talk to any woman about her experience, she's probably going to be like, yep, that's right.
Wow.
And that's why I think a lot of women can take it or leave it when it comes to sex, because they're just like, why would I bother? And a lot of what I do is showing people what they don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So what you just said about that bed shaking, life-changing, ecstasy-inducing, hours-long orgasm type sex, that's what I'm trying to show people is possible for everyone. And so if they've had these experiences of really short-lived or disappointing intimacy, that can be totally different and totally changed. So for men, yeah, I'd say the number one most important thing for men to work on is their stamina. And I would say that the absolute minimum for a man is to have 1 hour where he's able to have intercourse and not ejaculate, so that he's in full control of his ejaculation. So the way to get there is conscious breathing. Most men, when they're approaching, and women too, but especially men, when they're approaching orgasm, they tend to hold their breath, breathe really shallow, tighten up the body, this like right, like kind of experience, and then they pass out, right?
I'm dying.
Yeah,
right
we
now.
all know that face, right? Every woman is like, yeah, I know that face, and that clench, you know? And so the opposite is what to do, is to really breathe deep. Like I recommend a 4-count inhale and a 4-count exhale, like a yoga, vinyasa flow breath, right? And especially at the edge of orgasm is breathe and breathe and breathe, because that's when people are most likely to hold their breath and go into these old clenching, energy curtailing patterns. And so instead we want to open up the breath, relax and open up the body, and that allows the sexual energy to move and recirculate through the body. And so not only does a man and a woman build stamina, but they're also nourishing themselves. The breath is acting to move and recirculate the sexual energy in the body. And so then we end up feeling energized after sex rather than tired after sex. And again, that's the question that I said earlier. If you feel energized after sex, you're doing it right. If you feel tired after sex, then there's a way that you're leaking all of that energy out of you through your sexual experience. And so we want to get to the place where you have sex and you want to go to the gym. You have sex and you want to run a marathon. You have sex and you want to clean your house from top to bottom. You know, that is when you know that you've taken that pure, beautiful life force energy and now you're wearing it, you're radiating it, you've disseminated it through your entire system, right? And it's nourishing you. That is the goal of sex. Pleasure, great, awesome. Like, but for me, it's really this idea, this is your fuel source, right? And it's free and abundant, and you can use it anytime you like.
Yes. And so do you feel like the more that men practice that breathing, that it will just get easier over time, basically?
Definitely. I have had men go in a few days from being a 5-minute ejaculator to being able to go for an hour by really consciously practicing these breathing techniques. And I've got a playlist on my YouTube channel called Sexual Mastery for Men, where there's some videos on how to last longer in bed. My Sexual Mastery for Men online course goes into this in great detail. But yeah, like, you know, really within days. I mean, if these are really, and they often are, long-standing patterns for people, then it can take sometimes longer. It can take a few weeks, but seriously, it can happen that quickly where you can change a lifetime of a pattern into something where you now have control and consciousness over that power.
I'm really going to encourage the women listening to this to have their partners tune in to this episode. I have a largely female audience, but this is such powerful, pivotal information for both men and women to learn. And now going in the other direction for women, can you talk about, you know, you talk a lot about numb vaginas, and a lot of women have these weak numb vaginas, and how that obviously plays a huge role in the enjoyment of sex. So can you talk about that? And also let's get into jade eggs.
Yeah. So yeah, most women have numb vaginas, and that's for a few different reasons. Number one is because they don't exercise them properly. So the idea of do your Kegels, which most of us have heard over our lifetimes, is actually faulty, meaning that the original exercise that Dr. Kegel invented in 1947 involved using a device called a Kegel peroneometer inside of the vagina. And so by contracting on this device using feedback and resistance, just like the idea of lifting weights in the gym, we would build muscle strength. And he had a 90% success rate in using this exercise in his practice to heal urinary incontinence. And then other doctors over time adapted the exercise, except they just told women to omit the device, omit inserting anything into the vagina, and instead just flap their vaginas at random in the wind, and immediately the success of the exercise tanked, 50%, and it's been dropping ever since, right? The stats are that 60% of women have issues of urinary incontinence, and 50% of women, according to the Yale University School of Medicine, after childbirth suffer some kind of pelvic organ prolapse, which is insane, right? It's insane that that is the the normalized reality that we live in. And so lack of exercise or proper exercise is the number one reason for that numbness. But then it's all kinds of trauma and internalized beliefs like we've been talking about. Let's say having a string of lovers who just come within 3 minutes and feeling like your vagina is just something to be used for somebody else's pleasure, right? Or women who have a habit of putting vaginal lubrication, false lubrication, into their vagina, which is then perpetually overriding the voice of the vagina. And I encourage women not to use lube. I encourage women to cultivate that wetness from within. Whether it's physiological, because even using a jade egg, which is my recommended tool for building up pelvic floor strength and the vaginal strength, is creating the circulation. As you build that muscle strength, you improve circulation, and circulation equals lubrication. You get all that blood flow and oxygen and fluid moving. And then you create that sentience. If women have this disconnect with their vaginas through trauma or like a lack of physicality or bad sexual experiences, then they're feeling a dissociation, right? They're feeling like a lot of women that I work with feel like they don't even want to put their own fingers into their vaginas. They feel like it's this, really separate, almost scary foreign place, and it's in their own bodies, right? That's the reinforcing that they've had over the years. And so getting back into that connection and reviving it so that you have this vagina that's pleasurable and sentient and articulate, right? Like a nice analogy to use is this idea of thinking about your hand, right? Your hand can lie there and you can touch it and give it sensation, and it's a passive recipient of whatever is happening to it. Or you can have a very active hand that can squeeze and press and pull and isolate all these different parts of it. 1 finger, 2 fingers, top, bottom, left, right. That is what a vagina is really meant to be able to do, to have all that kind of awareness and articulation in it. And through using a jade egg, which is what I'm all about teaching, that's how we get that, is because that's the ancient practice. This has been happening for thousands of years in other cultures, especially in Taoist China, where we would actually practice this to keep our vaginas awake and alive and be connected to them as a power source.
So I love everything you just said, especially about the natural lubrication within your own body instead of using like a lube, which I think there's so much confusion about that a lot of people, women and men included, don't even know. So for women, women who are listening here, you do your work in regards to the jade egg, learning all about it. And then men, when you're going into sex, like if your woman is not naturally lubricated, like for me, I feel like the generosity goes a long way. Like my husband is extremely generous. So when it's time for us, and we have a very busy life, if I'm like, I got all the to-do things, I definitely still have that balance of like, okay, I got all these things to do. And then it's like, oh yeah, like let's have sex. And so he knows like I'm going to warm her up and be extremely generous. And then that's when it flows and it happens, and no lube needed.
That's beautiful. And this is why I recommend that couples have 3-hour sex dates. Once a week, you set aside 3 hours. That's not dinner, not a movie, not a walk in the park. It's just you guys locked in a room together to have sex. And that could be a number of things. That can be massages and oral sex and all kinds of body exploration. But you're setting aside that time when like you said earlier, these 20-minute rushed encounters, right? That that you've bookmarked this sacred time that is non-negotiable, non-interruptible. So you get childcare, or the kids are at their neighbor's house, or your friend's house, or your grandparents' house, or you get a hotel room, or an Airbnb for the night, or whatever it is. But that is your time, so that you have that feeling like you never have any pressure or rush, and you can just be with each other and let those things unfold. And if you can do that in a shorter amount of time, then great. But I encourage that as this sacred place where you know that you always have that. And even if you had that once a week, like ideally I'd say couples are having sex several times a week, but even if you had that once a week and then a couple of shorter encounters throughout the week, that would be enough to really hit these places of life-changing sex.
Yeah. Okay, I have a couple questions about the jade egg. Can women who are pregnant do jade egg? Is that safe?
Oh, definitely. It's one of the best times to do the jade egg practice because you want to prepare that pelvic floor and your vagina and be connected to them, right? There's a couple of issues there. Is that numbness and dissociation. If a woman's giving birth and she has that level of dissociation, how is she going to fully own her birth process, right? Unless she's really connected to her vagina. You're strengthening it, and so it's more available to you to use during birth, and then it recovers much more quickly afterwards. So for many reasons, plus the way that I teach the jade egg, it's always mind, body, spirit. And so I'm helping people to look at those potential emotional, psychological issues that they have that are blockages for them and help them to clear that space using the jade egg, right? Which again, I believe that our birth process can be hindered by all of these things that are hanging in the ethers, whether it's our sexual hangups, our relationship problems that haven't been addressed, or past birth experiences via us or our foremothers, and that we need to do that conscious work to really allow us to have the most ecstatic and orgasmic birth. So the jade egg is pivotal in doing that. Recommended highly.
Right. And do you feel like, because you were talking about women not wanting to touch their own vaginas, that you have had that experience. Do you feel like, because I know a few women who don't love their men going down on them. Do you feel like that's related at all?
I think so.
Like trauma related?
Yeah, it's that sense of dissociation, and I don't want to go there. I don't want my awareness there. And it could even be born out of past trauma, right? Out of sexual abuse in their history that they haven't addressed. And so it's just holding there in this holding pattern of don't go there, don't touch this, don't go too close, because it's very intimate to have someone right up in your yoni, which is very healing, actually, to be cherished and seen and adored that way. And so often the thing that we're avoiding might be the medicine that we really need to heal.
Right. And now a few words from our sponsor who helps make this show possible. What more perfect upgrade can you make in your bedroom to pair with the upgrade you'll be making in your sex life than incredibly soft eucalyptus bedding? The bedding industry actually has a huge impact on the environment, but Buffy decided to change that. Their products are made using only renewable and recycled materials, which makes them as soft on the planet as they are in your bed. Their debut product, the Cloud Comforter, is covered in super soft eucalyptus fabric and filled with fluffy fiber made from 100% recycled bottles. It has over 18,000 five-star reviews, and it is hands down the best comforter I've ever slept with. The Cloud Comforter is ultra breathable, softer than cotton, and keeps you at the perfect temperature to feel cozy without overheating. It's hypoallergenic and shuts out dust, mold, and mites for a healthier sleep environment. Plus, it's machine washable, which is super cool. The average down comforter harms 12 geese, but Buffy's comforter is, of course, cruelty-free. It feels softer than down while keeping about 50 bottles out of landfills and oceans. And eucalyptus uses 10 times less water than cotton to grow. Trust me when I tell you that this is the softest bedding you'll ever own. So use my code ELLEN for $20 off orders over $80. You can try a comforter in your own bed for free. If you don't love it, return it at no cost. So for people who are listening are thinking, okay, I have this checklist of things to do the work, to heal, and then I'm going to be having incredible sex, right? If both of us together as partners are working on ourselves emotionally, physically, doing those types of breathing exercises, jade egg, all that together, what can people expect from doing that kind of inner work and healing after that? What's the reward, basically?
Everything. I mean, this is that, overlying message is that it changes every part of your life. So you'll notice right away that your intimate relationship gets better, right? You'll actually, when I say this thing about having a 3-hour sex date, often people are like, what? Like 3 hours of sex? Like
I totally thought that at first. When I first heard you say that, I was like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. How, you mean intercourse for 3 hours? And I'm like, yeah, eventually. And then, a couple months go by of people really committing to that work. And they're like, yeah, we had actual intercourse for 3 hours and didn't even notice the time went by like that. So your relationship gets better because you're clearing that space, right? You're clearing all of that debris. I call it relationship feng shui, and all of that stuff that's been lingering and creating problems for you. And so you clear that out, your intimate connection gets so much better. You want to have sex with each other. You feel more close and connected. You become each other's fuel source, right? This is where you go to recharge. And then that starts to expand out into the rest of your life, where you feel you have more energy, more confidence, you don't give a fuck anymore. That's one of the big thresholds, especially for women, because women are really kind of conditioned to be people pleasers and subservient, is that women don't give a shit anymore what people think about them, right? They put their ideas and their opinions out into the world. They do what they want to do. They dress how they want to dress, and they don't care what other people think of them. They're not trying not to care. They just don't care. People will notice often in their jobs, right? Because your sexual energy is the pure expression of your very authentic nature. And when you're inhabiting it, everything in your life starts to then come into more true alignment with your true self, right? So let's say you were working a job that you didn't, it was more of a pay the bills kind of job, right? Not an expression of your individual dharma, your gifts to give as a person, then people often end up quitting those jobs just organically and then gravitating towards things that are more of a vital expression of their true nature. And that just happens, right? Again, they're not trying really hard to do these things. It just bubbles out of them. People's children start to, where maybe they were acting out before because they're tuning into all of these unresolved issues that are hovering under the surface with the couple. And now that the couple becomes this solid, unified core, is that then flows out to their family and their children. Their children feel more supported. Their children feel more contained. And so they start to act with more love, and they don't act out if they were having behavioral issues before. Those kind of fade away because the children are now feeling this incredible strength and support and unity from the core of them, which is their parents, right? And the parents radiate more love and joy and patience as well, which obviously the children tune into. In addition to that, people's bodies change. People magically just lose weight that seems to evaporate off of them because they've been orgasming it away. So orgasm is this incredible metaphysical tool. Physical, yes, all of the amazing neurotransmitters and hormones that get released through orgasm and more increased sexual activity help with all of that, with your mood and your body weight, your energy levels, but they also help you to lose weight. Like, I've had clients who just had this extra 10 or 15 pounds on them that they had dieted, they had nutrition, they had exercised away trying to get rid of, and then they started to have amazing sex and it just fell away because the weight, the excess baggage, the excess weight, they were now burning and alchemizing through sex and dealing with that. And I often say that you can save thousands of hours and thousands of dollars on therapy by having really deep, amazing, epic orgasms. It will burn through all of that stuff in ways that you never dreamed possible. So people start to see the results, even in money. Sex and creativity and money are all second chakra issues. And so people start to then, as I say, channel that sexual energy out into the world. They become more creative and they end up generating more cash because it starts to fall into their lap, because their lap is what attracted it. So as they start to give their true gifts to the world, the universe reciprocates and gives back to them. So all of these things are sourced from your sexual connection. And these are areas that we might never have thought would be connected, right? Made no relationship between our cash flow and our level of connectedness as a couple. But it's true. I've seen it over and over and over again. People going from kind of a famine, poverty place in their lives and their financial situation, and then they really work on their relationship and suddenly they're attracting all of this abundance in every possible way, not just with dollars but with opportunities. And so that's, again, tuning into this life force energy of the universe that it can seem hard to really fathom because of all the lies that we've been told about sexuality, all the misinformation, all the taboo, all the shame that's layered on top of that, when really it's almost not even, it's not a moral thing. It's just like, this is your life force power. And when you learn how to use it, yes, you create from that place, and all of these incredible things happen in your life.
Yes, I love how you explain that it bleeds into every facet in your life. And I know that that's been my personal experience within our own relationship. And so much of it is the mindset of abundance. And so when you have that abundance in your life, with your sex life, with your partner, your overall relationship will be better, and then you will start seeing the world in a more positive way, and then that has a huge impact. I know that from personal experience, like just a few days ago, Andrew, or my husband, was starting to be snappy at me, and we were just kind of snappy at each other, and I'm like, oh, we have not had sex in a week. We need to make a priority and figure this out. And sure enough, when we just like really surrender to each other, give each other everything that we need emotionally, through our private time alone together, and make that a priority, like our relationship flourishes and the family life flourishes, because we're all just happier and more joyful.
I love that. And I love that you had that realization, like, oh, we haven't had sex in a little while. We need to get back in there and recharge, right? And generate that power source. And then, yes, it flows out into everything. So I love that you had that inclination, like, oh, that is the issue.
Yeah. Right. Well, that was partly from what you've said too. A lot of the things that we've read, it's like, if your partner's being cranky, maybe they need to be fucked.
Yes.
It's so funny. Okay, sorry. It's just so funny that we're talking about this over the internet. I'm still tripping about it. But can we get into cervical orgasms, what you call the queen of orgasms? I think a lot of women don't have the tools, or maybe like, okay, they're in it they've learned a lot from you, and they're growing a lot in their psychology and changing and doing the work with jade eggs and stuff, but like maybe still haven't gotten there. So what advice do you have? Any details you can give to like help women, or help men help women reach that like deep cervical orgasms?
Right. So in my work, I'm all about the vagina. I say that the good stuff, the better, more life-changing, power orgasms are in the vagina. And so, the deeper you go, the deeper you go. The clitoral orgasms are great as a warm-up, as an appetizer, but then the deeper, more nourishing, really life-changing orgasms are in the vagina. So we have the G-spot and then the cervix, which, yes, I call the queen of female orgasms. And in Taoist reflexology, because they map out reflexology points in the vagina as well, they look at the cervix as being the heart point. And even in Western medicine, the vagus nerve goes up from the cervix, the vagus nerve, which is thought to be the most spiritual nerve in the body, up all the way through the heart into the crown chakra, right? And so having these cervical orgasms taps us into the heart, but also into this full spiritual, universal rebirthing energy. And that's why I say these are like the best good fuck medicine for women. Women have this incredible power tool at their disposal, which is their cervixes. And, also to know that if a woman no longer has a cervix, she can still have cervical orgasms. She can tune into that energy as a phantom limb and still get to these amazing places. So all of the vaginal orgasms, so G-spot, ejaculating or squirting orgasms, and cervical orgasms all have one major factor in common, which is this idea of surrender and opening and letting go. And so if you have any kind of unresolved issue with your partner, any kind of unresolved issue with yourself, it's going to be very difficult to get there. And so as an example, let's say that you had an argument with your partner over breakfast time and you never really cleared it, right? You're still kind of holding it, or you just tried to put it aside, but really there's some stuff that you would have liked to have said and to have dealt with, but you don't. And so you go to have sex that night, and maybe he's not that hard and you're not very wet, and you have sex anyway, you use some lube, you do some extra things to make it work, and then you don't have your orgasm. Well, if you build it, they will come. You didn't build it. You didn't do the preliminary work to clear that space. And I guarantee that if you had cleared that argument, and if you didn't have years worth of those things that needed clearing, you would much more easily get to that place. And that's the other thing. There could be decades or years worth of stuff that people have, like I said before, swept under the carpet and never dealt with. That is going to impact whether you can get to these deeper states of orgasm. in a really big way. Plus, this whole idea of having a numb vagina. And so practices like using the jade egg, yoni massage is another beautiful way to really explore, do vaginal reconnaissance, open up into the vagina and de-numb the vagina. And so I have a couple of great videos on my YouTube channel on yoni massage and pussy shiatsu, and I go into it in detail in my Coming Together salon in Vaginal Kung Fu, like a step-by-step process of how to do it. But there's beginner guides in my YouTube channel. And that's a really great way to get to know your own vagina and your partner to get to know your vagina and help that denumbing process. So there's all these multifaceted steps that you can take to open up that space, because you want to feel like you know your vagina inside and out. And that if there's any of your own personal traumas that you haven't dealt with, like sexual abuse or assault, or even these beliefs that we've been talking about, all of that stuff will play into it. So now you're getting a bit of a picture painted of how much work it might actually take. So when people go to, look, some people, I'll just say to them, look, I guarantee that every woman can have G-spot orgasms and cervical orgasms, and some women will go home that very night and have their first G-spot orgasm just because I told them they could, right? They bought into this narrative that only some women can, don't feel bad if you can't, which I say is total BS. Every woman can. They go and they do. For some women, they might have more baggage, right? More of these traumas and blockages that need to be cleared before their body is like, okay, you've helped me, you've healed me, you've cleared the space, there you go. If you build it, they will come. So this is the kind of stuff that's all through my salons of this inner work, both physical with the vagina, jade egg, yoni massage, all of that kind of stuff, and then energetic and inner psychological, spiritual work to clear space. It's really what it's all about, is feng shui, sexual feng shui.
Yeah. That's so beautiful, especially because it's not only just for when you're in bed with your partner, it affects all facets of your life. So that's incredible. So I have a question about keeping the simmer. Can you elaborate a little bit? I've heard you talk about it and it's fascinating about the importance for women, but I think men too, but especially women, to keep that simmer throughout the day. And what is it that keeps a simmer? Can you explain that? And how do you get there? Where like you're doing the dishes and your partner walks by and brushes up against you and it turns you on, or you're feeling that simmer with them. What keeps that, and how do you get there?
Right. So the idea of the sexual simmer is that there's always this hum, this electricity between you. So think about when you're actually feeling attracted to your partner, or maybe it's the prelude to you going off to the bedroom. What's that energy, that palpable energy between you? Well, I'm saying that you live with that all the time to some degree, right? And instead of like everything going from a 0 to a 10 and back to a 0 again, you actually exist at a 7 or 8, this perpetual simmer. And so part of that is all of the stuff that I've just described, is this open communication, ongoing clearing of your blocks between you, within yourself as an individual, and then practicing with your partner. And so that could just be the example you gave, this loving sensual touch throughout the day. So you walk past them, you might give their butt a squeeze, you give them a kiss, but it's not just a perfunctory peck. You have a short little 10-second makeout session in the kitchen. And great if your kids see. That's awesome if your kids see, because they need to know that their parents are really into each other. It's one of the most reassuring things that you can show them, is that their parents not only love each other, but they love making love to each other. Right? That actually builds strength and trust in your children. It's one of the most powerful gifts that you can give them. So text messages, giving them like either loving and adoring text messages, or a flirtatious text message, photo if you want to send it. All of these things are keeping that energy lifted, right? Keeping it alive between you. So then when you go to have sex, boom, you're already nearly there, right? You live in that state. And that might seem hard for people, because maybe in our instant gratification kind of society, thinking like, oh, I have a tinge of arousal, I should go bust out an orgasm. Like there's this pattern of like feeling that and then wanting to nullify it. right? To go back to that zero place. And I'm like, no, you actually start to train yourself to live in that 7 or 8. And that's when you become this really sensual, radiant being, that you're living in that energy all the time. And that is normal, right? That's what I consider to be normal. And the idea that we're dissociated with that energy might have become normalized, but it's not normal. Normal is living in bliss all the time.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that because I know some women, this isn't for every woman. I know that, different personalities and what they crave for their love languages are different. But for a lot of women, they might desire that type of affection throughout the day, like brushing up against or give me a mini make-out session or send me a sexy text type thing. But then some men might be like, yeah, but when I do that, then I want to have sex and I know we can't have sex right that moment. So I can't do that at all. But you're like, you need to build up your stamina so that you can handle it and keep the simmer with your partner, which is perfectly said.
That's really the tantric way and philosophy, is that you build your capacity for more and more pleasure, right? So like what you said, that cop out of, oh, it might be too much for me, fucking deal with it, build it and learn to live there, right? You're increasing your threshold of pleasure and living and existing in that place. So if normally, a 5 out of 10 is where a lot of people exist, or lower, right? You move that to a 7, to an 8, to a 9, to a fucking 15 out of 10 is where you start to live in terms of pleasure and flow and bliss in your life. And you can, everyone can, right? But this is the process. Yes, it's work and play to get there, but it's possible for everyone.
Yeah, all the stuff that you're saying actually kind of makes me think of people, men or women, who have had sexual trauma and how they might be told, there's nothing you can do about it. You're going to experience this trauma and not be able to have maybe open-hearted sex your whole life, when really you're talking about true inner healing so that you can experience this next level, orgasmic, open-hearted type of sex. And it's a really beautiful concept, the idea of truly healing inside from whatever the traumas be, whether it's sexual trauma or just trauma based on what you've been told about sex and relationships. And yeah, it just makes me think of it all together, all tied in.
I agree fully. And it is that's one of the big, in Western medicine, there's a lot of very doomsday diagnoses, right? We have no cure for that. We don't know how you got it. We don't know how to fix it, but you'll just have it forever. And maybe if you take these pills forever, it'll kind of be moderately, mitigated, right? It's a really, I don't put any stock in that at all, right? I believe that there's a solution for everything and that we can find it, and there's a natural solution for everything. So that's my philosophy, and that as above, so below, meaning if we go inside and do that deeper emotional, psycho-spiritual work, that filters then down into the physical body and can heal anything in the physical body.
Yeah. So I have a question that I've been wanting to ask you, which is when it goes back to that first thing I said, where if I could sit down and have a conversation with you, this is what I would ask you is, what about women who recently gave birth or they're breastfeeding and their libido is just naturally lower? What's your advice to them, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's correct that phrase. Libido is naturally lower, for one, because I think that's something that people buy into. Again, it's something that might be normalized, but is it really normal? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of, answers to that question. I just did an interview with someone who was 8 months pregnant when she found my work, and she it just fired up in her. She's like, I don't care if this maybe for most people would not be the right timing to do this work. She's like, we're in, right, to her partner. And so she just threw herself into it. She gave birth early, even so it was a week or two later she gave birth, and then they were within days she was having intercourse with her partner. She just decided that exactly. This is how it's going to be. And I'm not going to fall prey to these ideas and, kind of spells cast upon women saying that this is a really, challenging time for them. And so she took charge. She became cause rather than effect in that situation. She told a story of how 1 week after giving birth, she baked 100 cinnamon buns. She started this whole baking business and had the most impetus to do it right after giving birth. And she really accredits her sex life. Like she says that even with her partner, like when they've stayed up all night with the baby, they have sex, because that they know is the thing that's going to give them energy to fuel their day, rather than thinking, oh, we're tired, we'll go to sleep, let's not have sex right now. They do the opposite, and they've trained themselves to do that.
Wow, that's interesting. When it comes to the thing about at night, when you're up all night with your baby, let's just have sex and make it a beautiful experience. Like, take care of the baby, and the baby's going to be up in an hour or whatever. Like, that is actually pretty cool, because I fully believe in the power of the mind. I know you and I are both on the same page with that. And I think the mind is incredibly powerful. And like you said, it is told over and over again, your libido is lower right after you give birth and when you're breastfeeding and everything like that. But I agree with you that the mind is that powerful that if you really believe in something, you will make it as an incredible experience of it's really what you make it. I think that as far as like health as well, like if what you're eating, if you truly in your subconscious believe it's healthy for you, you're going to experience health benefits, as opposed to if you're eating something that like maybe you're told it's healthy for you, but like your subconscious is like, I don't think this is actually healthy for me, you're going to experience some maybe less than subpar health. So your mind is so powerful. So that's really interesting about the libido and breastfeeding and all of that. And I think like what you make a priority really, really affects whatever's a priority for you, really makes a difference.
Well, it's really embodying that idea that your sex life is your power source, right? If you're having a baby, like you need each other. You need each other as an energy source to plug into. You need that more than ever. And often, if a couple is having any kind of challenges and then they have their birth, and especially if there's any issues in the birth, that's going to drive them further apart, right? That's going to separate them. Where I try to encourage couples, like I have a whole program because of that called Sexy Mama, that's about bringing couples together so that they're a solid unit prior to the birth. They have much more chance of having a pleasurable, even orgasmic birth, and then they're even closer after the birth, rather than the opposite of what typically happens, right? Because I think that birth trauma is a massive issue. Why a couple, and because there's no space to really acknowledge birth trauma and the atrocities of it, is that people separate and dissociate because of that, right? And that's why we see couples separate, not physically like divorce, but I mean energetically separate after birth rather than come together, is because often so many births are rife with trauma, right? Rather than being a peaceful, loving entry into the world. And that we're not training ourselves to go to each other for that power source, right? That's the main thing that I'm always trying to drive home with people, is that you go to recharge with each other. And that is the most powerful rejuvenation source that you have. And so you, like I said, like the couple, they're up all night, and instead of like passing out, they're like, we need to make love now to have energy to get through this day together.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And everything you just said about that deep desire to want to reconnect with your partner and just recharge, it makes me think about how you talk a lot about how we should be loving our partner's genitalia. And I know that there are some women who don't like love or enjoy going down on their man. So can you elaborate on that, on why we should love our partner's genitalia and how to help encourage that?
Well, look, our genitalia really are the essence of who we are, right? That is the core of us packaged up in that space. And so I really encourage people to love up their partner's genitals. And so many people have insecurities about their partners, their genitals in general, like especially men, right? Their cock size, their performance. And so I'm always encouraging women to love their partner's cocks and to slather it with affection every way that you can. As you're walking by it, you just give it a little stroke and a little hello, as much time as you can spend with it. And I, over the years, have fallen in love with my partner's cocks. And I end up having 2 relationships, one with the partner and one with their genitalia. And I miss them both when they're not around. So this is one of the most beautiful gifts that we can give our partners, is to really help them to own their genitals and love their genitals, right? And remove any kind of shame or or embarrassment or insecurity. It's one of the massive things we can do to heal and regenerate on that level is being seen, right? Truly being seen and cherished and adored. And I, over the years, have had partners whose cocks then grow because I have given them so much love that they actually gain an inch in length and width because they've been loved up so much. They can truly own themselves and grow into their full potential.
Yeah, I think the way that you worded that about like truly loving your partner for everything that they are, it makes so much sense. And the mind shift within that based on a lot of the maybe the things we've been told about sex and about our partner versus like tuning into really loving who they are and their essence. And like that will just just overflow that love for their genitalia as well. And that really helps you to open up when you're in the bedroom as well, because you truly feel seen and loved and like cherished. It's really powerful information.
Yeah, there's no hiding, right? And all the places where we're hiding, I like to call it demon hunting, right? Like you go looking for those places and then illuminate them, bring them all into the light, and you heal each other. That's one of the most beautiful gifts that you give is all the places where you have darkness and fear and embarrassment and past hurts. You open up those places and you love them back up to this full potential of who we are.
Yeah. So can we shift a little bit and talk about women who are single? Like we've talked a lot about gourmet sex with your partner and pleasure. Let's elaborate a little bit. And can you share a little bit about like women who are single and the pleasure that they can experience, or what you suggest and advise?
Yeah. Look, I've had some of my most well-fucked periods of my life when I've been single because I committed to a regular self-pleasuring practice, a regular yoni egg practice, and yoni massage. So the tools that I've already talked about, using the jade egg, yoni massage that you can do on yourself, and then regular self-pleasure, right? It's keeping that engine revved up so that that same power source that I've been talking about all along, it's available to us whether we're in partnership, where yes, it gets amplified tenfold, but you still have access to that. And I've, women that I've worked with and myself have had epic results in tuning into that energy and then channeling it out into the world, even as a single person. So one of the best things that I can recommend is, well, those top 3 tools: using a jade egg, doing yoni massage as that vaginal self-reconnaissance, and then self-pleasuring. And I would say to kick it off, if you've been in, let's say, a dry spell, is commit to a 30-day challenge. And so every day for the next 30 days, you're going to be self-pleasuring. And this is the kind of stuff where I actually have a technique that I use called meditate, masturbate, create that really fits for self-pleasuring. So the idea is that you spend about even a few minutes in meditation, and I use mantras for meditation. So any kind of charged word. One of my favorite ones is called Hu. It's pronounced H-U or Hu. And you chant that for a few minutes, and then you self-pleasure. So anywhere from, I would recommend at least 15 minutes to 30, even 45 minutes of self-pleasuring, incorporating that deep breathing that I was talking about, and then go do something. The create part is then being aware that you have this powerful life force energy, and either go do something that's typically creative, like writing, drawing, painting, but gardening, playing with your children, doing some kind of work project where you're aware of funneling all of that energy into that project.
Yes. Okay, cool. I'm so glad that you touched on that, because I think a lot of times maybe people can be listening to this conversation and go, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm single right now. But the way that you explain it and how this really is truly part of our innate power within us, and to harness it, I think that's really beautiful, and definitely not something that I was taught growing up at all.
No, it's really the opposite, where masturbation is really shameful and somebody gets caught masturbating, right? Which can be early imprinting of that sexual repression, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so can you also talk a little bit about conscious monogamy? I know that you've talked a lot about that on your channel. Can you elaborate? What are your thoughts on it? What does it mean, conscious monogamy?
Well, my assertion is that 99.9% of people actually aren't monogamous. They might call themselves monogamous, and maybe they're not having sex with other people. Maybe they are, but they just don't tell each other. But they're really not truly consciously monogamous. And my definition of that is that it's when you pour all of your emotional and sexual energies and into your partner, right? You're fully open emotionally. You're not holding back. You're not playing little defensive games and having barriers that you hide behind. You're fully exposed and open. And the same thing sexually. You're fully in abandonment and surrender. All your walls are down. Hardly anybody has that, right? And so what most people are saying when they say, oh, monogamy doesn't work, you're actually saying that shitty relationships don't work, because most people just have really crappy relationships where they're lying to each other, they're not sexually really open to each other, they're playing these games of, sins of omission and not telling the truth and not really asking for and getting what they want, and they're calling that a relationship and they're calling that monogamy. But really, like I said, it's just a bad relationship. So the amount of people who have what I actually describe as conscious monogamy are very few. Most of them come out of my work, right? Because I teach them all these practices of how to actually cultivate that in their intimate lives. And then, yes, they have that level of full gourmet sex, heart open, genitals open, fully giving to each other. And in those situations, they have no desire for other people, right? That desire for other people, when it's usually hidden behind, we're so liberated, we're so modern, this is what humans were meant to be. Like, I debate that, because when I work with couples, even if they've been in that headspace, when we peel back the layers and we figure out like what are the decisions that often cause them to go in that direction, something that wasn't happening in the relationship. And then that's what I work on is, well, how do we make the relationship its best, right? And one of the arguments that people will use is, well, are we really meant to be having sex with the same person our whole lives? And I say, well, if you're committed to growth and evolution, you aren't having sex with the same person. Your partner is constantly changing and evolving into new and better versions of themselves, and so are you. However, if you're committed to stagnation and you're committed to being the same person for the rest of your life, then yeah, you are having sex with that same person. And I could see how that could be dull and boring, which again is really just that same idea of being in a crappy relationship.
Oh my gosh, everything you just said is so on point. I so resonate with everything you said. I feel more deeply in love with my husband every year, and we've been together since we were 15 and 16 years old, and we are completely different people than we were when we were in high school. And I think about how, like you said, if you're committed to evolving and growing and being open to change, it really does deepen your desire for that person, because you see the goodness in them, you see their growth, and it's very attractive. When you're with someone who is not wanting to grow or change, it's very depressing, because then you kind of feel stagnant. You feel it's harder for you to grow, and you're like just stuck in this awful place. And that's why open communication and openness, honesty, and trust is so huge and integral in like a beautiful, like love-filled relationship. And it all ties together, everything you're saying, because the more love that you're deepening together, the better your sex is and the better your relationship is. Yeah, wow.
All of those things, and a commitment to growth, like the idea that yes, we're always looking at how to become the best versions of ourselves and how to make the best version of our relationship, where I think most people maybe unknowingly are committed to stagnation, right? Like, oh, I don't know, it's hard for me to fathom. I often say there's two types of people in the world: people who are committed to growth and becoming better in their lives and themselves, and people who aren't, right? And the kinds of work that I'm talking about is like both people really do need to be on that path. And one person can be on that path and invite the other person, and then they can just focus on their own work, and sometimes the other person comes along and sometimes they don't. But ultimately, to reach all of these epic places I'm talking about, both people need to be on that journey.
Yeah, and I think it's like such a beautiful symbiotic relationship, because my husband brings things things out of me. It brings things to light that I need to grow in, and I'll do the same thing for him. And while it might be hard and frustrating at first, and you're like, I don't want to change, or I can't change, or like, I'm fine, leave me alone. But when you're willing to just open up and realize, hey, this is where I need to grow, because we all have our different things that we're better at, we help each other grow. And oh, it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful part of relationships. And I love the way you described that, how we're different people if we're committed to change, and you really can deepen your love for that partner. And then you don't like, you're not going to desire other people and other relationships, because you're just so committed and in love with your growth together.
Right, and that depth builds over time. And, you know, there's this whole idea that our intimate relationships are meant to trigger each other on deep levels and bring up old wounds, because we're in that really intimate space with each other. And then a conscious relationship will go, okay, great, we look at these triggers as they come up, and we, as I said, illuminate them and transform them and heal and grow and evolve through them. Where in a less conscious relationship, people like, oh my God, another problem. Oh, there's always problems, you know, like, and then they kind of give up on the relationship or never think they should put any energy into it, or just, you know, numb it out, right? Over time, where, like I said, that giant pile of debris just gets bigger and bigger, to the point where people are so disconnected from each other that they either leave the relationship or they stay in it, and then they have other partners or whatever else they do to cope with that level of disconnect between the couple.
Wow. Yeah, this is such pivotal information, such vital information, all tied in together. So I just have a couple more questions for you. One of them being, how did this become your passion, and how did this become your business? Because there's other sex experts out there, but I haven't found any other ones that are like you.
Ah, thanks, Ellen. Well, look, it's been a very organic process. Like, as I was growing up, I had this awareness of my sexual energy. And as this portal, like my intuitive sense was, it was like this opening, this energetic portal to other states of consciousness and awareness. And so I always had this kind of spiritual association with it, even though that didn't come from anywhere in my life. It didn't come from my family. It didn't from the culture at large. It was somehow this innate knowing. And then I had some really powerful, epic initial sexual experiences, like cervical orgasms early on in my sex life, and then discovered tantra and Taoism and found, okay, look, there's these cultures and these systems of philosophy that really are a better reflection of my intuitive journey than anything that I've seen in Western culture, right? Or worldwide culture that defines what sex is or describes what it can be. And so I really followed that, and then mostly but my own exploration and journey, and then all of that combined with always being interested in, how do we change, how do we grow, how do we self-actualize and become the best versions of ourselves. So even as a teenager, I was studying meditation, philosophy, looking at nutrition, alternative healing, herbs, homeopathy, exercise, all of this stuff, transpersonal psychology. I was just self-educating. I was hungry for all this information because, again, obsessed, like, how do we evolve, how do we grow, how do we transform? And then to me, my sexual experiences were really like some of the most powerful things that I would emerge out of one of these cataclysmic encounters and feel reborn, feel like I was the better, more like authentic, powerful version of myself. And so sex was always a tool for me, like a growth tool for me. And then eventually I just put all of that stuff together to create my holistic sex and relationship coaching. And no one really talked about it the way that I did until I came along, because before I came along, it was really like clinical lab coat, sterile view of biochemistry sex, or kind of like this cosmo giggly juvenile, oh, did you see his willy? Oh, like kind of childish, view of sex, and nothing in between that was like sexy sex of, sex is empowering and beautiful and healthy and holistic, and we can still have a voracious sex drive but be a fully competent, successful, powerful person, like blending all that middle ground together. And so it just And plus I really do practice what I preach. Like, my creative energy comes from my vagina. And so as much as I think of myself as a teacher and a healer, I'm a creator. And so I have so much fun coming up with all these different ideas of how to promote these concepts, right? So rather than, like, let's say for vaginal strength, doing interviews of like, well, women will pee their pants less if they do these exercises. I'm out there lifting objects indigenous to various regions all over the world with the hashtag things I lift with my vagina, right? Lifting chandeliers and mangoes and coconuts all over the planet. And so then that stuff goes viral and people get excited about it. But I'm using these playful, creative, fun ways to educate about serious topics. But I'm doing it in ways that turn me on, right? Yeah. That stuff, it gives me so much pleasure and joy, and I get turned on. And that's my litmus test. If I get turned on, it usually turns on or wakes up other people.
Oh, totally. When you say certain things, the way you say things, my husband and I read your weekly emails and we're like, oh my gosh, yes. Like, even just the part about loving your partner's genitalia. Then we go into the bedroom. I'm like, yes, what was this veil over my head, like my face, that like maybe it's not that great when really it's actually incredible. And the way that you can cherish each other, like just even just reading words and learning that information is very sexy for people, and it really helps people get into the right mindset to go after it.
I love it. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So lastly, you have a course that's relaunching soon called Vaginal Kung Fu. Can you tell us about that, and when does it relaunch? For people who are sitting here, they're listening and they're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to like change my life, change and just like increase intimacy and love and connection in my bed and in my life. And they're like, where do I begin? You definitely need to get her course. Please talk about it.
Well, it all starts in your vagina. So hence Vaginal Kung Fu, the art and practice of power from your vagina. So that's my signature course where I teach people how to use the jade yoni egg. And so it's got a series of physical exercises, guided MP3s, as well as guided visualizations and meditations. But then it encompasses the whole sexual being. So we do everything from breast massage to all kinds of modalities for healing, block clearing, as we've been talking about, to make your vagina your power source, right? To make that connection, bring it back, to de-numb it, so then your vagina becomes your compass. It becomes your guide in life, right? Your mover and your shaker and your orgasm giver, so that it's everything. You're fully reconnected and you embody that sensual power and energy in everything you do. So like all of my work, it's many dimensions. So physical with the exercises, emotional, psychological, spiritual, energetic, so that we have that whole person healing. Because in my experience, when you do whole person healing, you have permanent results and not just short-term fixes. And so that's the name of the game. So the course starts, it opens for registration on the 19th of January, and then it's open for a couple of weeks, and then we start early February.
Perfect. Oh, well, this is perfect timing because this is right when this course this episode will be coming out. And for everyone listening, either consider getting the course or just go onto her YouTube channel, subscribe to her email list, because I promise you it is life-changing stuff. And just consistently start listening to this information on your podcast. You have a podcast, correct, right? You still post that consistently?
Yes. So my Orgasmic Enlightenment podcast, actually there's an episode just put out there called 5 Techniques to Create a Super Pussy. So along these lines, and it's called Orgasmic Enlightenment. And then I also, on my YouTube channel, I put out educational videos as well. So I'm always putting out tons of free content. I have all my online courses that are available, like the one you just mentioned. These are my 8 to 10 week classes that run throughout the year, but I also put out a ton of free content for people to take advantage of, and I recommend that you do.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I really hope everyone listening or watching today gained so much inspiration from this conversation. I know I did. I can't wait for my husband to get home, that's for sure.
Love it, Ellen.
I know, right? Well, I feel like that's pretty good. I covered a lot of what I wanted to ask you, and I'm just so thankful I got to have this conversation with you, and I cannot wait to share it with the world. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was a delightful conversation.
It really was. Okay, cool. Well, we are signing off now. Thanks everyone for watching. See you next time.